Imagine a place where survival is the only law, a place where violence is routine, power is determined by fear, and freedom is a distant memory. Welcome to South Africa's toughest prisons, where gangs run the show, guards struggle to maintain order, and the outside world seems light years away. But the real question is, how did these prisons become such harsh environments, and what does life really look like on the inside? In today's video, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the world's most dangerous prison systems to find out how South Africa's history, social dynamics, and gangs have created a volatile and often deadly environment inside its toughest prisons. Stay with us as we explore the brutal realities of life behind bars. South Africa is a country known for its stunning landscapes, vibrant culture, and complex history. But lurking in the shadows of its beauty is a darker side, an overcrowded, violent, and deeply troubled prison system. South Africa's prisons, some of the harshest in the world, reflect the country's broader struggles with inequality, crime, and social tensions. To understand what's happening behind the walls of these notorious facilities, we need to dig into the stories of the inmates, the prison gangs, the overworked guards, and the system that often seems like it's on the verge of collapse. Let's take a look at what life is like inside South Africa's toughest prisons. To understand why South Africa's prisons are so dangerous today, we have to start with the country's history, specifically the legacy of apartheid. Under apartheid, which ended in 1994, South Africa's government enforced a strict racial hierarchy that segregated people based on skin color. The black majority was marginalized, stripped of economic opportunities, and subjected to brutal state violence. As a result, when apartheid collapsed, the country was left with deep social inequalities, widespread poverty, and high crime rates. All of these factors contribute to the conditions we see in prisons today. High crime rates in South Africa, particularly violent crime, mean that a large portion of the population is either incarcerated or knows someone who is. The country's prisons are overcrowded, housing over 155,000 prisoners in facilities designed for far fewer. This overcrowding creates an environment where violence festers, and the authorities are often stretched too thin to maintain control. So what does this mean for life inside these prisons? It means that, for many inmates, surviving the day-to-day becomes their main goal. Overcrowding is one of the most serious problems facing South Africa's prisons. The country's criminal justice system often incarcerates people for minor crimes, further swelling the prison population. In some of the toughest facilities, prisoners are packed into cells designed for far fewer people. A cell meant for 20 might hold 50 or more inmates, with people sleeping on the floor, sharing minimal resources, and experiencing near constant tension. Imagine being stuck in a room with dozens of others, all vying for the same limited food, water, and space. In such conditions, tempers flare easily and violence is common. Fights break out over the smallest disagreements, and new inmates are often targeted by gangs looking to assert dominance. There's also the looming threat of disease. Overcrowded conditions and poor sanitation create a breeding ground for illnesses like tuberculosis and HIV, both of which are prevalent in South Africa's prison system. But if you think the overcrowding alone is the worst part, think again, because inside these walls, power dynamics can be deadly. In South Africa's toughest prisons, the real power isn't held by the guards, it's held by the gangs. These gangs have intricate hierarchies, strict codes of conduct, and territories carved out inside the prison walls. The most notorious are the number gangs, including the 20SXS, 27s, and 28s, each with its own role and reputation. These gangs have been around for over a century and are deeply rooted in South Africa's prison system, operating almost like mini governments within the prison walls. For inmates, joining a gang can offer protection, but it comes with its own risks. Once you're in, there's no getting out. New recruits often go through brutal initiations that involve committing acts of violence against fellow prisoners. The gangs control access to contraband, including drugs, alcohol, and weapons, and they even dictate aspects of daily life, like who gets to eat first or where certain inmates can sleep. The guards, often outnumbered and outgunned, frequently either turn a blind eye to gang activity or are too afraid to intervene. Some guards are even in cahoots with the gangs, smuggling in contraband or looking the other way in exchange for bribes. For many prisoners, aligning with a gang becomes a matter of survival, but also makes everyday life a constant battle for power. Violence is the language spoken inside South Africa's toughest prisons. Whether it's between rival gangs or individual inmates trying to assert dominance, physical aggression is used to settle disputes, gain respect, and maintain control. Stabbings are common, and prisoners often create makeshift weapons from whatever materials they can find: sharpened toothbrushes, bits of metal, or even food trays. In many cases, the violence isn't just random, it's organized. The number gangs, for example, have strict rules about how violence should be used. The 28s, who are known for their brutal discipline, use violence to keep their members in line and to maintain control over certain sections of the prison. For new inmates, especially those who refuse to join a gang, life can be a nightmare. They're often seen as easy targets, subjected to physical and sexual violence, and forced to pay for protection. Inside these prisons, violence is a currency, one that can mean the difference between survival and death. The prison guards in South Africa face an impossible task: maintaining order in a place where chaos often rules. Many guards work long hours for low pay, and the stress of working in such dangerous conditions takes a heavy toll. With the prisons overcrowded and gangs in control, it's difficult for guards to assert their authority. In many cases, they are simply outnumbered. A single guard might be responsible for monitoring dozens of inmates at once, and any attempt to intervene in a violent situation could put their own life at risk. Corruption among guards is another major issue. Some are bribed by inmates to smuggle in contraband, while others may turn a blind eye to gang activities in exchange for money or protection. But there are also guards who try their best to maintain order and ensure that prisoners are treated humanely. For them, it's a daily struggle to balance their duty with the reality of the dangerous environment they work in. Despite the violence, overcrowding, and dominance of gangs, there are still efforts to reform South Africa's prison system. Programs that focus on rehabilitation and education are slowly being introduced, with the goal of giving inmates the skills they need to reintegrate into society once they're released. These programs include vocational training, counseling, and even art therapy, which help prisoners find a sense of purpose and self-worth beyond the prison walls. But the reality is that for many prisoners, the road to rehabilitation is a long and difficult one. The harsh conditions inside South Africa's toughest prisons can break even the strongest spirits. For those who manage to survive and eventually get released, the challenge of reintegrating into society, while carrying the stigma of being a former inmate, is immense. South Africa's prisons are a reflection of the country's broader social and economic issues. Overcrowding, violence, and the dominance of gangs are symptoms of a much larger problem: a society grappling with inequality, poverty, and crime. Reforming the prison system won't be easy, but it's clear that something needs to change. As we've seen, life inside South Africa's toughest prisons is a daily battle for survival. But beyond the violence and chaos, there is still a glimmer of hope. With the right reforms and a focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment, it's possible that the country's prison system could become a place of healing and transformation rather than a breeding ground for violence. Until then, life inside South Africa's toughest prisons remains a stark reminder of the struggles that still plague this complex and deeply divided nation. Thanks for watching.